You walk into Costco on a Saturday afternoon with your cart and you steer it straight to the back of the store because the meat case is where the real shopping happens and everybody knows it. You get there and you stop and you look at the ribeye. It looks good. It is marbled the way the picture in your head is marbled. And the sign says $16 a pound. You do the arithmetic standing right there, because you are a grown man or a grown woman and you have been doing that arithmetic a lot more often than you used to. 4 people, a pound apiece if it is going to be a real dinner. $64. That is before the potatoes. That is before anything you would actually put next to it. And something goes down a little in your chest because ribeye used to be a Wednesday and now it is a birthday. You are working the same hours you worked 5 years ago. You come home just as tired. Your paycheck did not shrink. The case got bolder. The sign changed and your bank account did not. And every time you stand in front of that glass, you decide the same thing a little faster, which is that this week is not the week. Now, let me tell you what is actually happening while you are standing there 20 feet behind that glass in the back of that same store. In a cooler you have never seen, that exact same meat is sitting in a bag. Same animal, same grade, same muscle, same morning. Nobody has touched it yet. $10 a pound, $6 a pound is what it costs to walk that meat from the back of the room to the front of the room. And the walking takes about 4 minutes. Nobody in that store is going to tell you that, not because they are dishonest. Most of them are decent people, and a few of them have been at it as long as I was. They will not tell you because you did not ask. And the whole thing is built on you not knowing that asking is a thing you're allowed to do. Put the tray down, just set it back. My name is Frank Miller. I cut meat for 31 years, and I started in a shop with sawdust on the floor back when the quarters still came in hanging on a rail and you walked one off the hook onto your own shoulder to carry it to the block. I have broken down more hindquarters than I can put a number to, and I stopped counting somewhere in the second decade because counting is something you do when the work is still new to you. My hands do not open all the way flat anymore. My left shoulder tells me when it is going to rain, and it is right more often than the radio is. There is a hard ridge of callus on my right index finger where the bolster of a knife sat every working day for 31 years, and it has not gone soft in the years since I stopped. I have not bought a steak off a tray since 1993, not one, not on sale, not for a holiday, not when I was in a hurry. And my wife has opinions about how much of the refrigerator is mine. I have learned which of her opinions to answer and which ones to let go by. In the next 40 minutes, I am going to tell you exactly what that bag in the back is called and the number the trade uses for it, so that when you say it out loud at the counter, the man behind the glass knows he is talking to somebody. I am going to show you how to cut it on your own kitchen counter with one knife you probably already own in under 20 minutes with no saw, no equipment, and nothing to buy. I am going to tell you the honest number you save, not the number that would make this a better video, because the honest one is smaller, and I would rather you hear it from me than find it out later. And near the end, I am going to show you the piece, that there is a muscle inside that bag that is better than anything you have ever bought off a tray in your life. It is not a secret cut, and it is not a trick. It is right there. It has always been right there. And it comes off with your fingers in about 2 minutes if somebody shows you where the seam runs. Almost nobody has eaten it whole because of the way that case is built. That is the one I want you to stay for. That is the thing they taught you in your first month behind a block, back when a shop kept somebody long enough to teach anything. And somewhere along the way, it stopped getting said out loud. So let us say it out loud. You do not need a bandsaw. You do not need a grinder. You do not need a walk-in cooler, a hanging scale, a boning hook, a vacuum sealer, or a rack of knives on a magnet strip above the sink. You do not need a class, a certificate, or somebody standing over your shoulder telling you that you did it wrong. You do not need strong hands. You do not need to know one single thing about a cow that you do not already know from eating one. You do not need permission. One knife, one cold table. There is a bag like the one I described sitting on the bottom shelf of my refrigerator right now, 16 pounds. Dark red through the plastic, a little wet along the seam where the vacuum pulled the air out. $160 paid on Tuesday morning. Out of it, I am going to take 11 steaks, one roast for Sunday, better than a pound of fat that becomes something else, and that one piece I mentioned. Now, here is the part that is going to bother some of you, and I would rather bother you than waste your time. The meat case is arranged to fool you. I know that because I helped build those cases, not the metal and the glass, the arrangement, which tray goes where, which face goes up, which steak sits at eye level and which one sits down low, where a man has to bend, where the light hits, what goes on the end cap on a Friday afternoon in July. None of that is an accident, and none of it was decided by the man cutting the meat. It was decided upstairs by people who have never stood behind a block, and it was decided for one reason, which is the number at the bottom of a page. And here is the piece inside, that which people outside the trade never hear. The price on that tray is not the price of that steak. The price on that tray is the price of that steak plus every steak like it that did not sell. Somebody has to pay for the trays that sit there past their date. Somebody has to pay for the ones that go brown at the edge under the light and get ground on Sunday night at a loss. Somebody has to pay for the steak a customer picked up, carried halfway across the store, changed his mind about, and set down in the cereal aisle. And that somebody is you, and you pay for it on the trays that do sell. That is what the $6 is. It is not the cutting. The cutting takes 4 minutes. Let me start with the thing you have to understand first, because everything after this depends on it. A steak is not a thing. I want you to sit with that for a second because I know how it sounds. A steak is a thing. You can hold one. You can put it in a pan. But no animal on this earth ever grew a steak. An animal grows muscle, long ropes of muscle laid over bone, wrapped in fat and silver skin, running from the neck to the tail, each one shaped by what that animal did with it every day of its life. That is what comes off the rail: muscle, fat, bone, and connective tissue. A steak is where somebody decided to put a knife. That is all it is. It is a decision. Thickness is a decision. Which direction the cut runs is a decision. Whether the fat cap stays on at a 1/4 inch or comes off flush is a decision. Whether the cap muscle stays attached to the eye or gets pulled away and sold separately is a decision. Whether you get a steak at all or a roast or a pile of stew meat is a decision. And every single time you have ever bought beef in your life, somebody else made that decision and then charged you for the privilege of not being consulted. Now think about what that means for the price. You know already that a ribeye costs more than a chuck roast. Everybody knows that. What you probably do not know is how small the expensive part actually is. Take the whole animal, all of it, everything on the rail, the rib and the loin together, the part that gives you every steak you have ever been excited about: ribeye, strip, tenderloin, T-bone, porterhouse, sirloin. All of it comes to somewhere around 8% of the hanging weight. 8%. The other 92% is shoulder and leg and flank and neck and rib bones and fat and trim. It is all good eating. Some of it is the best eating on the animal if you know what you're doing with it, but it is not what the advertisement has a picture of. So you have a whole country of people all reaching for the same 8% of every animal at the same time and then acting surprised at the price. Tenderness is not quality. Tenderness is location. A muscle that worked hard is tough and it tastes like something. A muscle that hung there along the backbone and did almost nothing for 2 years is tender and mild. That is the whole difference. It is not better beef, it is lazier beef. And we have built an entire pricing system on top of laziness. which is why the $6 gap matters so much on this particular cut. When you're already buying into the most fought over 8% of the animal, every dollar of unnecessary markup on top of it lands directly on the part of your grocery bill that already hurts. I learned all of this from a man named Walt. Walt was the first cutter I worked under in the first shop that would have me. He had been in Korea and he did not talk about it. He was maybe 60 when I was 19, which at the time seemed to me like the far end of a life and now seems like about 10 minutes ago. Walt did not teach the way people teach now. He did not explain anything before he did it. He would put a subprimal down on the block, cut it, wrap it, and then look at me to see whether I had been paying attention. And if I had not been, he would not do it again for me. That sounds harsh. It was the best thing anybody ever did for me because it taught me to watch hands instead of listen to mouths, and hands do not exaggerate. He had names for things, not real names, shop names. Every shop has them, and no two shops have the same ones. The first cut you make on any long piece of meat, the one where you take a slice off the end and throw it in the trim bucket because it is ragged and oxidized and shaped wrong. Walt called paying the toll. You do not get on the road until you pay the toll. I have never heard anybody else call it that. I have called it that for 31 years, working down the length of a ribeye, cutting steak after steak. He called walking the roll. And he had one line he said so often that I did not understand it for years. And now I think it might be the truest thing anybody in that trade ever said to me. The box tells the truth. The tray tells a story. He meant it about grading, I think, originally. He meant that when the meat comes into the shop, it comes in a box with a label on it, and that label is close to a legal document. It says what it is. Then somebody takes it out of the box, cuts it, puts it on a foam tray under a light with a little sticker on it, and now it is a product with a story attached, and the story is written by whoever is selling it. Everything I am about to show you is just a way of getting yourself back to the box. So let me tell you what is in the bag in my refrigerator. It is a subprimal. That is the trade word, and I would rather you have the trade word than a comfortable one. Primal is the big piece that comes off the carcass. Subprimal is what the packing house cuts that down into before it ships. What you buy on a tray is what somebody cuts a subprimal into. The one I have is a boneless ribeye. In the trade, it has a number because everything in the trade has a number. 112A. That is a boneless ribeye with the lip on, meaning a strip of the outside fat and meat is left attached along one edge. 112 is the same thing with the lip taken off. If you want it with the bones still in, that is a 109, and that is what a standing rib roast comes from. Those numbers come out of a book of specifications the meat industry has used for decades, so that when a restaurant in one state orders something, a packing house in another state ships the same thing. Nobody at a grocery store expects a customer to know those numbers. That is exactly why I am telling you them, and I will come back to what to do with them near the end. Now, why does the box cost 10 and the tray cost 16? Part of it is real. I'm not going to stand here and tell you a store adds $6 for nothing, because there is a man back there and he gets paid. There is a cutting room. There is a saw that has to be broken down and sanitized. There is film and foam and a scale and a printer and a person who has to be there at 5 in the morning. That is real cost, and it is right that it gets paid for, but it is not $6 a pound of cost, not on a cut that takes one man 4 minutes. Here's where the rest of it goes. Shrink. That is the trade word for everything that does not sell. Every case in every store has a shrink number, and the manager has to answer for it. Meat is the worst department in the store for it, because meat has a clock on it that starts the second the vacuum bag is open. Once that ribeye is cut and on a tray, it is a different product with a different life. 3 days, 4 if it is cold and the film is good. After that, the color goes. Not spoiled, just brown at the edge where the air touched it, which is oxidation and is completely harmless, and which will make a customer walk right past it every single time. So it gets marked down, then it gets marked down again, then it goes in the grind. The price you paid on the good tray covered all of that. Uniformity. The case has to look the same on Tuesday morning as it looks on Saturday afternoon. Every ribeye in that case has to be roughly the same size, roughly the same weight, roughly the same thickness, because a customer who sees one big one and one small one at the same price feels cheated by the small one, even though he was going to buy one of them anyway. Making everything look the same costs money, because the pieces that do not fit the standard get pulled and used for something worth less. And presentation. This is the one people do not want to hear. A ribeye has two faces. Every steak does, the two sides of the same slice. And on a ribeye, they are never identical, because the muscle structure changes as you go down the length of the roll. On one face, the cap might be thick and beautifully marbled and wrapped right around the eye. Turn the same steak over and it can be noticeably less impressive. The good face goes up every time, in every case, in every store in this country. That is not fraud. Nobody is lying to you. It is the same steak either way, and you are getting exactly what you paid for. But I want you to know that a decision was made about which side of that steak you would see, that the decision was not made in your favor, and that there were people in an office who studied which face sells faster. Now, let me be honest about the money, because this is the part where I have to take something back that would have helped me. I told you the gap is $6 a pound, 16 on the tray, 10 in the box. That is a true number, and it is printed on two signs in the same building, and it is also not what you save. Here is why. $10 a pound on the box is not $10 a pound on the steak, because not all of that box becomes steak. That 16-pound bag has fat on the outside that has to come off. It has a lip along one edge with some hard fat and gristle in it. It has two ends that are ragged and have to be squared up. It has a seam of fat running through the middle of it that you will lose a little of no matter how careful you are. And it has purge, which is the liquid sitting in the bottom of the bag that you paid for by weight and are about to pour down the sink. Realistically, you are going to lose somewhere between 12 and 18% of what you paid for. Call it 15. On 16 pounds, that is a little under 2.5 pounds gone. So your $160 did not buy 16 pounds of steak. It bought about 13.5 pounds of steak and roast. Divide it out. $160 over 13.5 pounds is closer to $11.80 a pound, which means the real saving against a $16 tray is about $4.20 a pound, not $6. $4.20 across 13.5 pounds is right around $57 on one bag on one afternoon. Now, I could have kept quiet about the yield and let you carry the $6 number around, and most of you would never have checked. I am telling you because $57 is still $57, and because if I shade a number in your favor when it suits me, then you have no reason to believe me later when I tell you something that matters more. And I will say one more thing against my own case while I am at it. There are weeks when this does not work. There are weeks when the store runs cut ribeyes at $8.99 a pound as a loss leader to get you in the door before a holiday. And in that week, the tray beats the box and you should buy the tray and smile about it. I have done it. Well, I have sent my wife to do it because there are people in that store who know my face. Watch for those weeks. They are real, and they are the only time the case is honestly on your side. All right, let me take you through it. I am going to give you this in order, and I want you to do it in order because two of these steps are only easy if the one before it was done right. 1, buy the box. You are looking for a whole boneless ribeye in a vacuum bag. Warehouse clubs carry them. A lot of regular grocery stores will sell you one out of the back if you ask. And I am going to tell you exactly how to ask in a few minutes. Look for something in the 13 to 18 pound range. Read the label on the bag. It will tell you the grade, the weight, and usually a pack date. Take the freshest pack date they have on the shelf. And if 2 bags are the same price per pound, take the one where the meat looks brightest through the plastic and there is the least liquid pooled in the bottom corner. 2, cut it cold. This is the most important thing in this entire video, and it is the thing that everybody gets wrong. Take that bag home and put it in the coldest part of your refrigerator, which is the bottom shelf at the back, and leave it there overnight. When you cut it, you want that meat right around 34 to 38 degrees, cold, firm, almost stiff on the outside. Warm meat does not cut. Warm meat smears. The fat softens, the muscle relaxes and spreads out under the weight of your hand, and the knife pushes the meat ahead of itself instead of going through it. You will end up with steaks that are thick at the top and thin at the bottom and ragged along the edge, and you will think you did something wrong with your technique when what you actually did wrong was let it sit on the counter for an hour first. And here is the common mistake, and it is worth its own sentence. People take the bag out, get distracted, cut it warm, get a wedge-shaped steak, and then that steak cooks unevenly forever after. The thin end is gray before the thick end is warm, and they blame the pan. Cold meat every time. If it starts to soften while you work, put it back in the refrigerator for 20 minutes. There is no prize for finishing fast. 3, open it over the sink. There is a good half cup of liquid in that bag. Cut a corner off with scissors, drain it, then take the meat out onto a tray and pat the whole thing dry with paper towels. Dry meat does not slide. A wet ribeye on a wet cutting board is genuinely dangerous. And this is the only part of this job where somebody gets hurt. Put a damp folded towel under your cutting board so the board cannot move. That is a shop habit. It takes 4 seconds. And I have never once cut on a board that was sliding. 4, learn which end is which. Lay it out in front of you with the long axis running left to right. Now look at the 2 ends. One end is bigger and more open. You will see more than one distinct muscle in it, separated by a wide seam of fat, and there is often a smaller round muscle sitting off to one side. That is the chuck end. That end was toward the shoulder. The other end is tighter and rounder and more uniform. One large oval of meat with a thin cap wrapped around part of it. That is the loin end. That end was toward the hip. Now find the fat seam that runs the length of the whole thing, separating that outer strip of meat from the big oval in the middle. Put your finger in it. Feel how it runs the whole way down. Remember that seam. I am coming back to it, and it is the best thing in this video. 5, pay the toll. Square up the chuck end. Take 1 slice about 1/2 inch straight down and set it aside in your trim pile. That first slice is oxidized and uneven, and it was never going to be a good steak. That is Walt's toll. Now you have a clean, flat face to work from, and every steak after this starts square. 6, walk the roll. Now you cut steaks straight down, perpendicular to the board, working left to right. Thickness 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 inches. I want you thicker than you think, and here is why. A thin steak gives you no window. By the time the crust is where you want it, the middle is gray. A thick steak lets you get a hard sear and still pull it at the temperature you actually wanted. If you have never cut steaks before, take a ruler and mark the first 3 with the back of your knife until your eye learns it. Your eye learns it faster than you would expect. Mine took about a week, and I was doing it all day. Use the length of the blade. 1 long pull, heel to tip, letting the knife do the cutting. Do not saw at it. Sawing is what you do when the knife is dull or the meat is warm, and it leaves a rough face on the steak that will not brown evenly. 7, take a roast while you're in there. Somewhere along that roll, decide you want a roast instead of 2 steaks, and simply do not make that cut. Leave 3 or 4 inches together, and you have a boneless prime rib for Sunday. That is the whole trick. There is no separate skill involved. A roast is 2 or 3 steaks that you decided not to separate. I take mine off the chuck end, and I will explain why when I get to the good part. 8, the far end takes planning. When you get down to the last 5 or 6 inches, you have to stop and think before you cut, because if you just keep going, you will end up with one ugly wedge at the end. Square up the far end first. Take the toll on that side too. Now you have a straight piece with 2 flat faces, and you cut that into however many even steaks it gives you. If it gives you 2 thin ones, that is fine. Thin steaks are not a mistake. They are a different tool. Somebody in your house likes their steak cooked more than you do, and a thinner steak is the honest way to give it to them without ruining a thick one. 9, trim but not much. Take off the hard, waxy fat on the outside. You will know it when you feel it. It stays firm and greasy under your thumb, and it does not render out in the time a steak cooks. So it just sits there on the plate. Leave the softer fat. Leave a 1/4 inch cap on the outside edge of each steak. That fat is where most of what you like about a ribeye comes from. People trim steaks bald and then complain that beef does not taste the way it used to. Every piece you take off goes in one bowl. Do not throw any of it out. That bowl is worth real money, and I will get to it in a second. 10, wrap it properly or you have wasted the whole afternoon. Air is the enemy. Wrap each steak tight in plastic wrap with the wrap pressed right against the meat, no air pockets. Then put them in a freezer bag and press it flat before you seal it. Flat matters because a flat package freezes fast and thaws evenly. Label the bag, date, and cut. You think you will remember and you will not. I have 31 years of not remembering. 2 in the refrigerator for this week, the rest in the freezer. They are good for 6 months easy, and honestly better than that if the wrap is tight. That is the job. That is the whole job. The first time it will take you 35 minutes because you will be careful, which is correct. The third time it will take you 15. Now here is the part that is not in any video about this that I have ever seen, and it is the reason I wanted to make this one. Go back to that fat seam, the one running the length of the whole piece, separating the outer strip from the big oval. That big oval in the middle is the longissimus. That is the eye. That is what people mean when they say ribeye, and it is the part that is in the photograph on the advertisement. The strip on the outside of that seam is a different muscle entirely. It is called the spinalis. In a shop, you will hear it called the cap or the decal, and different shops use those words differently, which is why I am giving you both. The cap is the best piece of meat on the animal. I am not going to hedge that. 31 years, I have eaten every part of it. The cap is the best piece of meat on the animal. It is more marbled than the eye. It has a looser grain that gives it a texture closer to a good short rib than a steak, and it tastes noticeably more like beef than the muscle sitting right next to it does, and you can take it off with your hands. Here is how. Take the first 3 or 4 inches off the chuck end where the cap is thickest and the seam is widest. Lay it flat, find the seam with your fingers, and just start pulling. Work your thumb into the fat and separate the 2 muscles the way you would peel a section of an orange, using the knife only where a piece of connective tissue holds on. The seam does the navigation. You are not cutting a line. You are following one that is already there. That is called seam butchery. It is how meat was broken down before saws, and it is how every muscle on the animal gets separated to this day when somebody wants to do it properly. In about 2 minutes, you will be holding a long, flat, ripple-grained strip of the best beef you will eat this year. Roll it up like a cinnamon roll, tie it with 2 or 3 loops of butcher's twine, and cut it between the strings into medallions 1.5 inches thick. Sear them hard in a very hot, dry pan, 90 seconds aside, and do not go past medium. That fat needs a little heat to come alive, so do not pull it rare. Now, an honest note, this is not a total secret. A couple of the warehouse clubs have started selling the cap on its own, packed by itself in a tray. If your store does, go look at the price on it, then walk back and look at the price of the whole boneless ribeye it came off, and you will understand exactly what I have been telling you for the last half hour better than any sentence of mine could explain it. That is what the 8% looks like from the inside. Inside the most expensive 8% of the animal there is a smaller and better piece. And when somebody figures out how to price it separately, they do. And here's the second thing you can do with that trade number I gave you. Walk up to the meat counter at a regular grocery store, not a warehouse club, and say this, not the whole speech, just this. Ask them whether they will sell you a whole boneless ribeye uncut out of the bag. If the person behind the glass is a cutter, and in a lot of stores now they are not, you will see something change in his face because almost nobody asks. He will very likely say yes, and he will very likely charge you close to what the store paid for it because it cost the department nothing. No cutting time, no film, no tray, no shrink risk, no clock. He is selling you 16 pounds in one transaction that he did not have to touch. If you want to be certain he understands you, tell him a 112A. And if he has been in the trade any length of time at all, he will know exactly what you said. You will not get a discount for knowing the number. You will get taken seriously, which is worth more. And in some stores, it is the difference between yes and a shrug. Ask on a weekday morning, not Saturday, never Saturday. Now, let me say the thing that separates this from most of what you will watch on this subject. Nobody paid me for any of this. There's no link under this video. There is no knife I want you to buy. I am not going to tell you to get a breaking knife off the internet for $45 and replace it when it goes dull, because throwing away a knife is the strangest idea I've ever heard, and I would not have said it out loud in front of Walt. Since somebody's going to ask, I use a 10-inch scimitar I bought in 1990. It has been reground 4 times. The blade is visibly narrower than it started because that is what happens to steel over 36 years of sharpening. You could do everything in this video with a chef's knife you already own as long as it is actually sharp. And I would rather you spend 20 minutes learning to put an edge on the knife in your drawer than spend money on a new one that will be dull in a month for exactly the same reason the old one is. The store is not selling you a knife either. The store is selling you the 4 minutes. Nobody in this business makes money by teaching you to stop needing them. Now, I want to widen this out because the $6 is not really what this is about. The cattle herd in this country is the smallest it has been since the early 1950s, not the smallest in 10 years, the smallest since your grandparents were young. Drought took the pasture, feed costs took the margin, and a lot of ranchers made the only reasonable decision available to them, which was to sell the cows that make the calves. Once you sell the mother cow, you are not 2 years from recovery. You are 5 or 6 because you have to raise a heifer before she can raise anything. That is not a headline that goes away next quarter. That is a floor under the price of beef for years. And I watched what that did on the other side of the glass, one customer at a time, near the end of my working life. I knew people by their standing order. That is not a nice line I made up for a video. That is just what the job was. A man came in every Friday for the same thing for 11 years, and you had it ready before he reached the counter. What I watched happen was that Sunday steak became birthday steak. Nobody announced it. Nobody complained about it at the counter because people have pride, and the meat counter is a public place. They just came in less. Then they came in for the same thing but smaller. Then they came in and stood at the case for a minute with their hands in their pockets, and then they went and got chicken. That is what a price increase actually looks like. It does not look like anger. It looks like a family quietly deciding that beef is not for them anymore and never saying so out loud. So I want to be careful about what I am telling you here because I do not want to insult anybody's arithmetic. $57 on a bag of ribeye does not fix that. The herd is the herd. The price is the price, and no amount of cutting your own meat is going to put cows back on grass in Texas. But I will tell you what it does do. You have not been priced out of beef. You have been priced out of the 8% of the animal that everybody fights over and then charged a second time for the convenience of not knowing how to touch it yourself. The first part of that you cannot do anything about. The second part you can end this weekend permanently with one knife and one cold afternoon. And there is one more thing in it that I think matters more than the money. And I would have said this even if it saved you nothing. When you break that bag down yourself, you find out what is actually in there. You find the cap with your own hands. You find out that a roast is just steaks you did not separate. You find out that the fat you have been paying somebody to throw away is worth keeping. You stop buying a picture on a tray and you start buying meat. And after you have done it twice, you cannot go back to standing in front of that case the way you used to. You will see the arrangement. You will see which face is up. I cannot unteach you that, and I would not want to. All right, here's your weekend short. 1, buy a whole boneless ribeye in the bag, 13 to 18 pounds, freshest pack date on the shelf. 2, refrigerate it overnight and cut it cold straight out of the refrigerator on a board that cannot slide. 3, square up the chuck end, then cut steaks 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 inches. 1 long pull of the blade, no sawing. Leave 3 or 4 inches together somewhere for a roast. 4, before you cut the chuck into steaks, pull the cap off along the fat seam with your fingers. Roll it, tie it, cut medallions. Eat that one first. 5, trim only the hard waxy fat. Leave a 1/4 inch cap on every steak, save every scrap in one bowl, wrap flat, label, freeze. Then come back here and tell me 2 things in the comments. Tell me where you are, town and state or country, and tell me what a whole boneless ribeye costs per pound at your store this week against what the cut ones cost in the case. I want the 2 numbers together. I read them, all of them. I want to see how wide that gap runs in different parts of the country, because I only ever saw it in one place. And I have always wondered, next time I'm going to show you what to do with that bowl of trim and fat you just set aside, which is worth more than most people would believe. And I am going to show you how to age a piece of beef in the refrigerator you already own. No special equipment, no cabinet, nothing to buy. There is exactly one mistake in that process that will ruin the whole thing in the first 3 days, and it is not the one everybody worries about. I will show you what it actually is. Until then, buy the box, cut it cold, keep the cap,